Hello and happy new year. I am so excited to be here kicking off 2024 with you all, our first podcast episode of the year. And saying 2024 feels so strange for me. I'm 37. I'll be 38 in March. And I can still remember the New Year's Eve that none of us will ever forget, which was 1999 when it was about to be Y2K and nobody knew what was going to happen. Were we all going to like implode when the clock had to read 2000 or whatever? Do clocks read that? Whatever they were worried about wasn't going to be able to handle the number 2000. Or was I going to get to like make out with someone that I had a crush on when the clock struck midnight to some like then popular song like Celine Dion? That's the way it is. I think neither one of those things happened. Obviously, everything went smoothly as we transitioned to Y2K, and it was a lot of much to do about nothing. And I don't think I made out with anyone as the clock struck midnight to a Celine Dion song, but I might be forgetting that part. If I did make out with someone that night, it is not stuck in my mind all of this time. It was not the most memorable makeout of my life. So feels very strange to be here saying 2024, but here we are. And I'm really grateful to be here with you, having a conversation that I hope will be really helpful for any of you here in our unmeasured community who maybe you're interested in intuitive eating, or you've been an intuitive eater, or you've become aware of diet culture and are, working to live your life a different way. But with the new year, it feels like there is a pull or a temptation to diet again. And you are feeling tempted or pulled to do that. But also, there's a big part of you that doesn't want to fall into old patterns. So I'm going to read the listener question. And if this is you, I hope that today's episode will just feel so supportive for you at this moment in your journey. I've done what feels like a million diets before, and of course, none worked long term. I finally found intuitive eating this past year, and I want to be an intuitive eater, but I'm feeling really tempted to follow a diet in the new year. Any advice on how to not fall into old patterns? There are so many reasons why we might feel tempted to fall into old dieting patterns after learning about intuitive eating, or after trying intuitive eating, or after even eating intuitively for a long period of time. And so I just want to say that it's okay to feel tempted to diet. And this is not a space where we need to feel any like shame or secrecy about that. I think it's really important for us to get to express how we feel, what we're going through, so that we can get the right support and take the right steps for us next to help to move us towards our ultimate like value aligned goals in our life and our relationship with food or with movement or with our bodies, with ourselves. And so I'm really grateful to this listener for sending in this message, because I think that there are a lot of people who feel this way, but maybe feel afraid to express that or to share that. And so the first thing that I just want to say is this is a judgment-free space. And I don't want you to feel any shame about the temptation to diet again. Diet culture is very prevalent. The diet industry has a lot of money for advertising, and many people have been conditioned that the new year means setting some sort of weight loss goal or engaging in some sort of diet culture behavior. I will never forget when I started trying to eat intuitively, learning about intuitive eating. And my first like new year came around thinking like, I don't even know what to do with myself if I'm not setting some sort of weight loss goal right now. I don't even know what to do with myself if I'm not spending time like plotting out what my new year diet and exercise routine are going to be to try to meet this like weight loss body controlling goal. And so if you are in that place of feeling like a fish out of water and not even knowing how to navigate this new year without dieting, or if you're someone who's maybe not dieted in a long time but are feeling tempted to diet this year, this episode is for you. If you are someone who is actively dieting, wants to be dieting, has no desire not to be dieting, you get to be where you are on your journey. And I've never felt like it was my work in this world to convince people not to diet. I think there are a lot of people who feel like that is part of their work or their purpose or their mission. And for me, that has never felt like part of my work. What I do feel like is part of my work is supporting those of you who no longer want to diet and want to experience your relationship with food and your body differently, to support people who are at that place in their journey. But if you're someone who is dieting, who wants to be dieting, this episode will not be for you. And I am not here to convince you otherwise. Everybody is on their own path, on their own journey. There were moments of time on my own path or my own journey where I wouldn't have even entertained the thought of eating intuitively. I wouldn't have been open to it. I wouldn't have been receptive to it. I didn't feel ready for it. Although I wouldn't have said like, I'm not ready for that. That's not the language that I would have used. I just would have been like, that's not for me. This is for me. This really trying to control my body with food and exercise, like that is for me. That's my work. That's how I felt at that time. And it was a series of events that brought me to the place of feeling open and ready for intuitive eating. And so if you are someone who feels, open to intuitive eating, wants to eat intuitively, but is feeling tempted to diet, I just want you to know that this is a space where you don't have to feel any shame about that temptation to diet. And I am not judging you at all. There were also many moments for me after starting to eat intuitively where I like re-downloaded my calorie counter or played around with, trying to like lightly control what I ate. And I think the key word there is control. I was grasping at control. And it may have been things that were happening in my body where I felt a little bit out of control. It might have been things that were happening in my life where I felt a little bit out of control. And so I wanted to feel more in control. And so the first thing that I want to start with in terms of any advice on how to not fall into old patterns is to notice why you are feeling really tempted to follow a diet in the new year. Be curious with yourself. And that's why it's so essential for us to kick off this conversation how we kicked it off, right? No judgment, no shame. Be curious with yourself. Why am I feeling really tempted to follow a diet in the new year? Like, what am I hoping that this will do for me? How am I hoping that this will allow me to feel? What do I think I'm going to be able to experience if I follow a diet in the new year? What is that desire there, that underlying desire? What is the thing that I feel like dieting is going to give me? And I'm going to start with control, because I think for many people, the answer to that question will be, I want to feel in control. It I don't like to feel out of control. I'm like, maybe there are people who like to feel out of control. I'm not one of them. I don't like to feel out of control. I would much rather feel in control than out of control. And the thing that for me unlocked a relationship with food that was more intuitive, and what unlocked for me the freedom to eat intuitively and ultimately to get to a place where I am now, where I would just call myself a normal eater. Intuitive eating was the bridge from dieting to that, or extreme wellness, which was often what I thought I was doing with food and exercise, when, definitely there was dieting undertones there, right? Um, the thing that freed me up to walk over that bridge from dieting to normal eating of intuitive eating was realizing that it wasn't about being in control or out of control. And that instead, I needed to really look at food as a relationship that I was creating. And if you've ever been in a relationship with someone who tries to control you, it's not a healthy relationship. If you've ever been in a relationship with someone where you've tried to control them, then you know that it doesn't feel like a healthy relationship. Instead, what we want to do in our relationships is we want to create connection. And that to me was a huge unlock. So if you're asking yourself, why am I feeling really tempted to follow a diet in the new year? And the answer is, I feel so out of control with food, or my body feels so out of control, and I want to feel in control again. Number one, I totally get that. When I feel out of control, I also want to feel in control again. So natural for that to be the instinctual response to feeling out of control, whether it's with food or in your body or maybe other areas of your life. Maybe the answer to that question is, all of these things in my life feel so out of control, and food feels like something that like I could be in control of. And I want to offer you something different from that, riding that roller coaster of being in control and out of control and in control and out of control, is that you can literally just get off of that ride when it comes to food. And this year, 2024, if you want it to be, can be a year where you start to think about this as a relationship, and you start to think about your opportunities and your work as creating and building connection. How can you create more connection when it comes to your relationship with food? I cannot believe the difference that this mindset shift has made for me. And I have seen it in hundreds of clients that I have worked with. This is such a game-changing mindset shift, but it doesn't just end with what's happening in our mind, right? It's not just, okay, now rather than thinking about being in control, I'm going to think about I'm going to think about this as being about connection. Yes, that is step one, shifting the way that we think about it. But step two is connecting that with actions, connecting that with behaviors, connecting that with the rhythms that you're creating in your life, or the things that you're practicing in your day to day when it comes to food, creating that connection. And into the intuitive eating framework gives you a framework to help to create that connection. If you are hearing the phrase intuitive eating and you are thinking, okay, from what I've seen on social media, intuitive eating is eating whatever I feel like and not following any rules, I will share that that is not the whole picture of intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is a framework created from 10 principles to guide us back to being intrinsically connected intrinsically to our body's cues around food. And it also, in this framework, includes things like honoring your hunger and your fullness. It includes things like moving joyfully. It includes things like coping with your emotions with things other than food. It includes gentle nutrition. There are so many different components to intuitive eating. If you are someone who is listening to this and you are thinking, okay, the term intuitive eating just means that I don't follow any rules when it comes to food and I just eat whatever I feel like eating. I want to share with you that that is not the whole picture at all when it comes to intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is a framework created by 10 principles that were outlined by two incredible RDs and that have been supported by hundreds of research studies. And I'm going to read to you the 10 principles of intuitive eating just so that you can have them in the back of your mind as we're having this discussion. The first is to reject the diet mentality. The second is to honor your hunger. The third is to make peace with food. The fourth is to challenge the food police. The fifth is to discover the satisfaction factor. The sixth is to feel your fullness. The seventh is to cope with your emotions with kindness. The eighth is to respect your body. Ninth is movement, feel the difference, which is all about a joyful, intuitive relationship with movement. And the 10th is honor your health with gentle nutrition. And you'll see we have an entire Unmeasured podcast episode about gentle nutrition with one of my dear friends, an amazing RD, Alexis Joseph. So you can check out that gentle nutrition podcast episode if that's something that you are interested in diving more into and hearing more about. But what I want to say is that these 10 principles, this intuitive eating framework, all of it is to support you to cultivate that deeper connection with yourself in your relationship with food, movement, and your body. All of these 10 principles help you to act in a way that is going to support that mindset shift, right? So it's not just the mindset work, but it's really bringing together healthy, supportive, loving mindset shifts with actions that allow us to live this out in our life, in our relationship with food. So if you are tempted to follow a diet in the new year because you want to feel in control, I just first want to validate that desire to feel in control when things feel out of control. And I second want to share that the 10 principles of intuitive eating can help to support the mindset shift of trading control for connection with these really amazing supportive practices, behaviors that can help you to create a more connected relationship with food, with movement, with your body, with yourself, rather than needing to ride this roller coaster of being in control and out of control and in control and out of control. One of my favorite resources for putting these things into practice is, yes, the book Intuitive Eating by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reich, where it talks about all of the principles. But there's a workbook that goes along with that. And so I think that's a really amazing place to start. If you are saying to yourself, I don't want to fall into old patterns of dieting, and I'm feeling really tempted because I want to be in control, I think a great action step could be to set an intention to create more connection in your relationship with food this year. And you can start with those resources as a way to practice that, to really have tangible things that you can do and that you can practice when it comes to your relationship with food. I also know that for some people, the reason why you might feel tempted to follow a diet in the new year is for health, right? For health reasons, because we hear that losing weight can lead to improved health outcomes. We hear that all the time in diet culture, right? And so I understand the desire to want to be healthy. That personally is a priority for me. Not everyone has to care about health, right? Like, I'm not here to tell you what you should care about in your life. That's for you to decide. And I would never assume that my priorities are your priorities, or that my values are your values, or that my goals are your goals. And if you do feel like health is a priority for you and health is a value to you, we share that. And I share in that priority and value with you. And I want to prioritize health in my life. I want to be as healthy as I can be in my life. And what's really amazing about research, which I think can be so supportive for us when we are processing through all of the messages that we receive from diet culture, the diet industry, extreme wellness messaging, right? Is that there are so many studies that show that intuitive eating can have amazing benefits when it comes to our health, right? When it comes to improving health biomarkers, things like cardiovascular health and cholesterol and blood pressure. It's incredible when you read the research studies how much of a positive impact on our health intuitive eating can have. And I think there are so many reasons for that. But for me personally, I think, some of the big reasons are that when I was dieting, when I was restricting, I was dieting, restricting, and then I would start binge eating, right? So it was like restrict, binge, restrict, binge. That is so stressful on the body. Also, when we are dieting and restricting, oftentimes our body is not getting the nourishment that it needs to function, let alone to thrive. And when we switch to the model of intuitive eating, and when we get to the place in our intuitive eating journey where we're able to start practicing gentle nutrition and things just feel so much more calm, so much more stable, we are able to really nourish ourselves physically, mentally, and emotionally in a way that creates such positive health outcomes. And so I would really encourage anyone who is tempted to diet in the new year but doesn't want to fall into old patterns, if you're in that scenario and the reason why you want to go on a diet is for health reasons, I would really encourage you to lean on the research and to lean on the studies. And so many of these studies are outlined on the website intuitive eating, intuitive so many of these research studies are outlined on the website intuitiveeating.org. They are also outlined in the book Intuitive Eating as well. And so many amazing resources can help to connect you to the research. And for me personally, when I was in that place on my intuitive eating journey of like, I want to be an intuitive eater, I don't want to go back to where I've been in the past, where it was so challenging in my relationship with food, but also I'm tempted to diet again. It was so impactful for me to read these research studies over and over again because it reminded me that it was okay to care about my health and that this thing that I was learning, this new way of being with myself, with my body, with food, with movement, was actually leading me to improved health outcomes. Okay. So I think that that's so important to remember. Intuitive eating has been proven. Research shows us that it is a proven way to improve health outcomes. And I think that that's just a really, really helpful reminder. If you are feeling really tempted to follow a diet in the new year because you want to lose weight, I also totally get that. I know that in the intuitive eating community, there can be this feeling of like, oh my gosh, I can't even say that like I want to lose weight, or that this is a desire of mine, or that this is something that I want. Listen, you are allowed to want what you want. Again, this is a judgment-free space. This is a shame-free space. We live in a culture where weighing less, losing weight, weight loss has been put up on such a pedestal. People are showered with praise when they lose weight. We are told repeatedly that weighing less is better. I can imagine that most people in this society from time to time or often are going to have the desire to lose weight. And so I just want to say that it is okay if that is the reason why you're feeling tempted to diet in the new year, is that you have the desire to lose weight. And I'd love to help you process through a little bit more about that desire. Just like we asked at the beginning, I think it's really valuable to think about, what is it that I am hoping losing weight will do for me? What do I think that it's going to unlock for me? What do I think that it's going to make available to me? What will I be able to experience? Do I imagine I'd be able to experience that I can't experience right now? And really understand what is like the underlying desire beneath that. If the desire is around health, then I again would encourage you to read the research studies, intuitiveeating.org. They share them there. Like understanding, the health at every size movement. There's been so much amazing research that shows that our health outcomes that we can have health goals, and we can achieve certain health outcomes without a focus on weight loss. So I think that's really valuable. And the other big thing that I want to highlight here is that it's so valuable to focus on health promoting behaviors and incorporating those behaviors more consistently into our life to support our health. And the reason why this is so helpful is because if you think about when we have a weight loss goal and everything gets filtered through, is this going to help me lose weight or not? Oftentimes, we end up engaging in behavior that feels very restrictive, which we are biologically wired to push back against. And oftentimes the behaviors that we engage in are not sustainable. And that is the reason why close to 100% of people who diet, who seek out intentional weight loss, end up gaining that weight back in the future, in like the next couple of years, right? And so when we shift our focus from the goal of weight loss, and I'm not saying that you can't have the thought of like, I want to lose weight, or I wish I weighed less. I think those thoughts are very understandable in our culture, in our society. And to be able to walk yourself through that thought using self-compassion. And again, we've got an entire Unmeasured podcast episode on self-compassion. So that would be a great tool in your toolbox. If you want to visit that podcast episode, it's a solo episode that I did all about self-compassion. But to be able to walk yourself through that desire to lose weight, and validating how you're feeling, remembering that you're not alone in that feeling, and also being really honest with yourself. What has that been like for you in the past? What have weight loss efforts been like for you in the past? And explore that, not just thinking about the fantasy of weight loss, but really outlining like, what is my fantasy here? And what are the facts? What has my lived experience taught me about the weight loss process? Like, if I have done things in the past to lose weight, how did I feel? How did it impact me mentally, emotionally, socially, physically? Like, be really honest about that. And were the behaviors that I engaged in sustainable? For me, and for so many women who I've worked with, the answer is no. You know, the pro of those weight loss efforts were it felt really good to get a lot of praise, right? Um, there were moments where I felt really accomplished. The cons, the list goes on and on and on, right? Like I had social anxiety around like around eating. I had negative health. My health was impacted negatively, lost my period, hair was falling out, autoimmune condition activated during that time. Felt anxious, felt depressed. Like there were so many things that were going on for me during that time when I was restricting and over exercising to lose weight. It wasn't all negative because it felt really good to get those compliments, right? It felt really good on the days when I was able to check every single box. But those pros were so small in comparison to the con list. And the reality was that it wasn't sustainable for me. And no matter how hard I tried or how much willpower I attempted to exert over myself, no matter how much control I tried to have over myself, my body inevitably started to push back on that because it's biologically wired to survive. And so that's when binge eating started for me. And so I think if you are someone who is feeling tempted to diet because you have the desire to lose weight, I don't want you to shame yourself about that desire. But what I would encourage you to do is be really curious with yourself. How has how has orchestrating your behaviors around the goal of weight loss worked for you in the past? And what has that really been like for you? Research shows us that it probably has not been all roses. And research shows us that it probably has not been sustainable for you unless you are in a very small minority of people. And I think it's easy for us to keep falling back into the dieting behaviors when we feel like we are the problem, right? Where it's like, well, if I just had more willpower, or if I just like, had the right mindset, or if I just did a little bit better job prepping my food at the beginning of the week, then I would be able to stick to this diet or this like extreme wellness plan or whatever it might be. The reality is that that's not why those things don't work out long term. We are biologically wired against being in that prolonged state of restriction. And so your body is going to do everything it can to push back against that. And that's why, close to like more than 95% of people who go on a diet cannot sustain that long term forever into the future. And so you're not alone in the desire to lose weight, but you're also not alone if as you're reflecting back on past attempts to lose weight, you recognize like, yeah, there were a lot of cons to that for me in my life, but also it wasn't sustainable. And if that's where you find yourself, which is where I found myself, I want to encourage you to ask yourself, like, what is it that you're hoping that losing weight will do for you? If it's that you want to lose weight so that you can be healthier, let's be intentional about incorporating some health promoting behaviors and habits that you can be really intentional about this year, right? Like maybe you want to practice moving your body more. Maybe you want to practice getting better sleep. Maybe you want to practice drinking more water. Maybe you want to practice incorporating more fresh fruits and vegetables into your meal. Or maybe you want to practice cooking more at home, or eating meals that help to, gently balance your blood sugar a little bit more. Like these are some of the things that we talked about in the gentle nutrition episode. These are health promoting behaviors. We don't have to be obsessive about them. We don't have to be regimented about them. We don't have to be strict or perfect about them, but we can absolutely practice incorporating these health promoting behaviors. And these health promoting behaviors are part of the intuitive eating framework. If you are thinking about why you want to lose weight, is if you're like, I'm tempted to follow a diet in the new year because I want to lose weight because I have clothes that don't fit me anymore. I also want to validate that it's frustrating when we look in our closet and there are clothes that we have bought and that we've spent our money on and that we love and they don't fit. Like, of course that is frustrating. That doesn't mean that your body is the problem. And one of the most awesome things about intuitive eating and really getting to a place where you are experiencing more connection with yourself and your relationship with your food, more trust, more self-compassion, and just more consistently feeling nourished when it comes to that relationship with food is that our bodies get to a more stable place. Intuitive eating is a weight neutral approach, which means that when someone starts to eat intuitively, no one can say if they're going to lose weight or gain weight or stay, around the same weight. But the intuitive eating framework helps to support us to get to our body's set point, which is a weight range where your body can rest comfortably, right? And yes, all bodies are made to change. We are in changing bodies right now, right? We may have experiences in our life where our bodies might change dramatically. Like pregnancy is a great example of that, right? Like that's an example of when a body might change significantly, but also just we're in changing bodies. Like we are all actively aging right now. I am aging as I record this podcast episode for you. By the time this episode is playing in your ears, I will be older than the moment when I recorded it to begin with. And so, yes, our bodies are absolutely made to change. They are changing. And I think there's an element to that that's important for us to embrace or at least practice to accept. And the yo-yoing weight up and down and up and down really does settle so much when we get to a place where we're not restricting and overeating, or when our body isn't totally stressed out on cortisol and other stress hormones from all of our dieting efforts and over exercising. But when we get to a place where what our body is experiencing on a day-to-day basis is so much more nurturing and consistent, that can really help. And I don't think that necessarily takes away from the sadness or the frustration of looking in your closet and saying, wow, when I was in a smaller body, I was able to wear those clothes, and now my body is bigger and I'm not able to fit into those clothes. And you can absolutely feel sad about that. And you can absolutely grieve that. And it is a bummer. And two things can exist at the same time that can be true without your body being wrong or bad. And so I think this is a moment where we can really work on our capacity to hold the both and. This is both hard, and it doesn't mean that my body is bad or wrong. And for those who are feeling like, oh my gosh, what if my body just keeps changing like forever and ever, and I just have to keep going out and spending all this money buying new clothes and more clothes and more clothes? I totally get that. I remember being terrified of that when I started my intuitive eating journey. I was like, "Oh my goodness. What if every 6 months I just have to keep going out and buying more clothes and more clothes? This is scary and so expensive, right?" And the beautiful thing is that we are most likely to be in a place where our body feels really healthy, happy, and relaxed when we are nourishing our body consistently. And the way that we get to that is not by dieting, it's by learning how to eat intuitively. And so I think that there is also something really like hopeful there. I hope there feels like there's something hopeful there. When it comes to weight set point theory. And no, that doesn't mean that we eat intuitively and we're going to weigh the exact same amount for the rest of our lives. No, our bodies are going to change, whether that's through aging or other experiences that we might have. And it's important to practice acceptance for that. And also, we can really get to a place where we aren't dealing with these huge changes in our body, weight loss and weight gain and weight loss and weight gain over and over again when we do decide to get off of that, in control, out of control roller coaster and practice being in connection with our bodies instead. If the reason why you are feeling really tempted to follow a diet in the new year is because it's just so hard to tune out the noise, the diet noise around you with friends and families, coworkers, people you're following on social media, and them sharing about their dieting, I totally hear that. And I think that this is a beautiful opportunity to do a couple of things. Number one, ask if there's any noise that you can tune out, right? So, are there podcasts that maybe you want to stop listening to, or Instagram accounts that you want to unfollow or unmute, or whatever it might be, right? Like, are there any of these messages that you actually do have a choice whether you tune in or out of them? And if you have a choice, beautiful. You have an opportunity to opt out if that's what you decide. When it comes to people in your life, I would really encourage you to examine where you are in each of those relationships and decide on a best course of action. If it's someone who you're really close with and you're like, yeah, I just really want to spend time with this person and I love being around them. Is this a situation where you can say, like, good for them, not for me, where you can let them be where they are without it meaning that you need to be where they are, and giving yourself permission to be in a different place in your food journey? Sometimes even just that mindset is enough, right? Like, okay, good for them, not for me. That might be what's working for them right now, but that wouldn't work for me. And I've done the reflection and I've done the self-connection and I've looked at the research and I've examined my lived experiences, and I know why this isn't right for me. And so I can trust in that and I can feel comfortable and confident in that. Is it a relationship where you might want to create a boundary or say, like, that I totally get that that's what you're into. Like, I'd rather if we didn't talk about this. Or is it a situation maybe with like coworkers where you can kind of tune them out, or sit with some other people at lunchtime, like really thinking through each of the relationships and asking, like, what is the best course of action here for me to feel supported? But I also think there's an element here too of not wanting to feel left out, right? When everyone around you is doing a diet and you're the only one who isn't, it can feel that can feel really hard. It can feel like we're missing out on what everyone else is engaging in or when everyone else has goals. And I think that's why it's so valuable to have places and spaces and people in your life who share in the place in their journey that you are in, right? So listening to podcast episodes like this where you know, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that is doing it this way this year, right? Like that can be so helpful. Maybe connecting more with friends who are similarly aligned. Or also feeling free to share what it is that you are focused on or you're being intentional about or that you might be working on this year as well. And you might not share the same goals per se as the people who are around you, but it doesn't mean that you can't share your goals with them, right? So whatever that might be for you, even if the answer is like, actually this year, like I'm not doing a word of the year. I don't have intentions. I'm not setting any goals, even just to share that, like, you know what, this year I'm just really focused on being in the moment. I'm not setting future goals for myself. I'm just really practicing being present or whatever it is that feels important to you. But to the other things that we've talked about in this conversation, choosing not to diet in the new year doesn't mean that you're choosing not to be intentional or that you're choosing not to heal or not to grow or not to have goals. You absolutely can have those things. Again, no pressure. You don't have to have them, but maybe your, new year intention is that you're going to practice cultivating more connection with yourself, right? Whatever that might look like for you. Maybe the thing that you are working on this year has nothing to do with your relationship with food. And maybe if you are like me, one of the things that I'm really focused on this year is just doing more fiction writing. And that's something that is feeling really fun for me. And I would love to share that with my friends, right? Like, hey, this is what I'm working on. What are you working on? And so I think that it's so valuable just to remember that just because you might not be dieting, it doesn't mean that you're not important or you're not interesting or you can't have things that you're working on. And it's also really important to remember that our life is so much more, so much more, so much more, so much more than our relationship with food, right? And for me, that's been one of the most incredible eye-opening like unlocks of the intuitive eating experience is that my life before intuitive eating was all about food and exercise and controlling my body. When I tell you that that was like 95% of my mental space, I mean it. I mean, that might be selling it short. It would have been like 99%, right? And after intuitive eating, I was like, oh my gosh, my life is so much bigger than this. My life is so much more than this, right? Like, you don't have to have any goals about food in the new year. You don't have to have any goals about health or movement or whatever if you don't want to. If this is an area of your life that you want to be intentional about, there are ways to be intentional about it without dieting. And if you're in a place of wanting to think about things that have nothing to do with food, great. And because we have the capacity to hold the both and, if you want to be intentional about your relationship with food and you want to be intentional about something else, you absolutely can. So what I hope that this conversation can show you is that there are ways to experience the things that you want to experience in your life without dieting. And I think compassion and honesty and releasing the shame, goes such a long way here. I know that for many people, when it comes to that feeling of like wanting to be in control, they can want to feel that control over food because they might feel like, oh, my clothes are getting like a little bit tight over the holidays, or I feel like I've been eating too much, or those kinds of feelings through the holiday season. And I just want to share with you that if you are experiencing some discomfort in your body, in your clothes, in your relationship with food, that you can still choose to practice connection with yourself. You don't have to take it to an extreme to remedy the discomfort. You can offer yourself compassion in that discomfort, and you can ask yourself really loving, connecting questions like, what do I need more of? What do I need less of? If I felt comfortable in my body today, or if I felt like my body was enough today, how would I want to take care of my body? And I think questions like this practice of curiosity can really, really help to guide us back to ourselves and can help us to connect more deeply with how we want to feel. And you can always ask yourself, like, how do I want to feel? What's one small action I can take today to help me to connect with that feeling more? And the last thing I'll share is just if there's any conditional thinking that's coming up for you, like, I want to diet in the new year because once I lose weight, then I'll finally feel, then I'll finally be able to do this thing that I've been wanting to do. A really beautiful practice could be building up the self-trust to do that thing now, because you are deserving of fun and enjoyment and adventure and expression and connection and love and respect in your body exactly as you are today. I hope that your new year is off to a great start. And I hope that there is something in this episode that will be supportive of you on your journey.